Hello, everyone. Welcome to this conversation. I'm joined by our Deputy Editor, Jessica, and our guests for today are Don Scoba, Junisha Khongwir, and Karen Larendiki Donoghue. Welcome, Karen and Junisha.
Thank you for having us.
It's
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure. So, as part of our Opus 6 theme, Labor of Art, we're diving into stories behind the creative process, and therefore we decided to invite Karen and Janisha to talk about Stories from the Valley, a book that they co-created. Um, it was launched at the Shillong Literary Festival in 2023. And this labor of love is a tribute to the diasporic Mizo community of Happy Valley in Shillong through evocative images, personal narratives, and treasured family photographs. The book paints a rich and moving portrait of community history, resilience, and cultural heritage. But before we begin, here's a brief introduction to Karen and Janisha. So, Karen teaches at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. Her research is focused on media representations of Northeast India in mainstream Indian media. And Janisha is an educator and visual artist. She's an assistant professor at the Department of Mass Media, St. Anthony's College, Shillong, and also the curator at the Northeast India Audiovisual Archive. So, to begin our conversation, I think the first question we had was, the bond between the two of you was quite evident in the author's note. So I was just curious to know how your friendship shaped this book and how you thought of going about it.
June and I mean, we studied together, obviously, under graduation, and we kind of clicked. So we were very different, I think, is the way to put it. We were very different, and we just became fast friends, though. And we just maintained that friendship, and we've not always been constantly in touch, but despite not talking with each other, I think we have that, soul friendship connection, whatever you want to call it. So when I went through this really crappy time, when my mom fell ill in 2022, and that's always difficult, we were just walking. It was a slow walk out of the pandemic, and to just be hit on the back of that with mom getting diagnosed with a terminal form of cancer. It was just my world came crashing, and I didn't know who else to call. And I remember calling her we'd gone to CMC Vellore. I remember standing at the top of the flat that we had hired, and it was really an act of desperation more than friendship at that point. And June was gracious enough to reach back and respond. And she was there for me when I returned back to Shillong. And then we started talking. And the thing is, we're both similar, but also dissimilar in that June is, we both feel very deeply, but we express very differently. So June is more of a visual person, and she wouldn't talk so much and verbalize so much. I'm a very verbose, verbal person. I like to verbalize the things I'm feeling and all of that. So we got together, and she came one evening, and we were talking. We'd always wanted to work together. I was I've always been a fan of her photography, and so I write a little bit here and there, not much, but so we were like, maybe we should just bring our practices together of writing. And I don't know, I think it was in that bonding over grief, because June also lost her dad in 2014, so she knows what it's like to go through that grief of loss of a parent. And somehow the universe conjured and worked together and conspired to bring these all of these experiences together to make us want to look at our roots. And at that point of time, I remembered growing up, I was constantly, basically, my history is a history of trauma. I haven't heard even one great thing about, your great grandfather. It was all about, like, we packed our bags and left. We packed our bags and left. And so we decided to channel our grief, our friendship, and our love for each other into a a work that was both, I think, scholarly in some sense and also creative in many different senses, but mostly a work that represents or tells stories. Because I think at the end of the day, the only way that we can meet suffering is by being open to revelation, and the only way that we can have revelation is by storytelling, through storytelling. And so that's how we sort of embarked on this journey.
Right.
Was that very long? I'm sorry.
No, no, no. That's a perfect start.
Yeah, I can add on to Kay, not just, writing a bit,
Mm.
but she writes a lot. She can, by the end of this, she might just throw in a poem for both of you. But
No, I
that's how she is. And, she's really, I mean, like, yeah, like, I think we just have this deep admiration for each other.
Mm.
Though I might not verbalize it a lot, but yeah, I highly, like, look at her, like, because whenever I need something to even just correct my whatever I write, I would send it to her, like, here, just take a look. So she's like my Grammarly and everything else in between, like, just check everything, how it sounds, the tone, everything. So I think that's what works. I mean, when you're very comfortable with somebody, where you just
Mm.
kind of reveal your vulnerable self to the other, even in work wise, just not just being friends or in, like, just personal things, but even in your professional front, when
Mm.
we just open up and just really share everything else. Like, sometimes I would say things to her, this doesn't work for me. I can't read through, your passages. And then sometimes she would show in, this is not working for me. I can't feel the photograph. So something like that. So I think that's how I think even for this book, I remember, when we first, like, I'm going to talk to just like a little bit on the, technical side of it in terms of how we started this, because in the archive, we started a project on peace building. And then it was around, since in 2019 we started that project, and we've been collecting a lot of oral histories from the state. And then, as when I met Kay, again, and like, when we just hanging out over, I think, soup, right? That was the day you made soup for me. So we were just talking about how do we tell our stories, or how, in what way, and yeah, just remembering that, and also putting a thought on how, because Shillong is such a place also that we find a lot of many other communities that reside here, and there's always this rift sometimes between Karen and I. We would have these arguments and whatnot about so many things, regarding communities and our beliefs, and how all those things, like, it started off like that. But I think at the end of it, it was more like finding a middle ground and finding a space to understand each other. And then that's when we thought of this project, and like, let's just give it a shot, and let's just write a proposal and see, if it's something we can go forward with. So I think of this peace building initiative, by the Sasakwa Peace Foundation, through the archive, I think it really gave us, a lot of momentum to just kickstart the project. Yeah.
This question for Karen. Junisha has already spoken about it, so we want to hear your side. What was it like blending your writing practice with Junisha's photography?
So June comes from a very different. Because I work in university, right, and there's certain constraints in terms of how we write, and we're aware of that. I can't go in. And June came from a very creative, artsy, archival space, and so we had to work on that quite a lot. And there was a lot of back and forth. But the thing in all of that was that what I think ultimately what made it work was just this. Just being able to listen to each other, because we talk a lot about collaboration and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's deep listening. The most generous thing that you can do if you're in a collaborative project is to be generous, and the best way to show generosity is by listening to each other. And when I say listen to each other, it's not just this passive act of listening. Um, is by sort of trying to understand what it is she was saying, from not from my perspective but from hers, and
Mm.
then she trying to understand what I was saying, not from her perspective, not through her perspective, but from mine. So there was a lot of really, really empathetic standing in each other's shoes. In fact, there's a word for this, but I've forgotten it. Um, that we had to do, and that was hard work, you know. So it wasn't like it was easy breezy from the beginning. Like June already pointed out, there were disagreements, there were conversations. Um, but because I think because and this is where the friendship is so important, because we love each other so much, there was space for us to listen to each other, and so that, you know, that we made that work. So for instance, even the structure of the book was something that we argued over, we talked over, we conversed over, you know, June, if you remember, what the photographs would look like, so everything in that book is a result of this deep conversation between two friends who made space for each other, you know. So it wasn't easy, but it enriched the entire process. And I would rather have the enriched version than the easy version, right? So yeah.
Right. Um, could you give us a little bit of context for our readers and viewers about the content of the book, the diasporic community that the book is covered?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, Happy Valley is the locality that we covered, and it's a small locality. You know how small towns have small localities, but this particular locality is known as, you know, Mini Mizoram, you know, Lushai Hills and all of that, and it's known for its, at least erstwhile, primarily Mizo population. Now we have a lot of new migrants there. I mean, I don't want to use old and new, but, you know, later migrants who've come from, like, for instance, Manipur or like other parts of the country as well. But in so Mizoram had a period of insurgency um, during ow 1966 to 1986. So they fought for independence from the country, because it's a very long story, but long story short, there's something called bamboo famine that takes place in Mizoram cyclically, because Mizoram has a massive bamboo cover, and when these bamboos flower, so different species flower at different times, but cyclically they flower every 30, 40, 60, 50 years. And what happens is the rodent population increases, and that they attack the granaries. And so grain shortage becomes really acute. And at that time in 1966, when this happened, no, prior to 1966, in fact, I think it was the famine of the late 1950s, early 1960s. Mizoram was then under the larger Assam government, and their cries for help. In fact, the Mizo National Front, which became MNF, you know, the party that fought for independence from India, were actually in the beginning Mizo National Famine Front. So they were fighting to sort of, you know, uh, 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 counter the effects of the famine, help people, and all of that. But they perceived, in short, because it's a very long account, but in short, they perceived the indifference of the Assam government, and by extension, the Indian government, as these are not our people anyway, right? And we all know, you know, Benedict Anderson's imagined communities, right? Like the idea of India and all of that. And anyway, the idea of a modern state is so problematic. So these revolutionary Mizo leaders saw their people suffering and decided to secede. And then then proceeded 20 years of really, really horrific. And I have spoken to, and not to belittle any of the other conflicts that the country is seeing or has seen. But some of the people that I've met, especially central officers and all of that, said that the pushback from the state was brutal. And there could be many factors to that, you know, the Pakistan thing, and then the China war, all of that was happening. But the pushback was very brutal. Aizawl was subjected to airstrikes, um, and it you know so a lot of the people who settled in Happy Valley are in one way or in some way or the other connected to that insurgency, right? It was not the only factor. There were a couple of other factors. The reason why Happy Valley became the place is also because there was already a Assam Regiment Center established there pre-independence, and they had a lot of Mizo men in their employ. So, you know, they already had that sort of a few Mizo men there who are familiar with the idea, Mizo families there who are familiar with the idea. But then the massive push factor was the War of Independence. Like my grandparents left their hometown in Saitwal. My grandmother, owned one of the first shops in her little locality, quite well to do for that time, right? There were no banks. They buried everything that they had, money in the earth. They took all of the goods that, my grandfather brought, being in the army, traveling maybe, I don't know, other parts of the country. They pre-safe, you understand, right? The days when there were no locks on doors. And so people literally, if you read the accounts, came to Shillong with nothing but the clothes on their backs. My mom came with two changes of clothes. One gets dirty, it's the other. So there's another family that came down with nothing but the only sustaining with, and so that is the general backdrop. Coming to the specific history of Happy Valley. Happy Valley is, as usual, as happens in places where either political refugees or displaced persons are settled. These places tend to be ghettoized in terms of the development, in terms of, yeah, well, development, in terms of even discursively, right? So you will not see stories about Happy Valley, certainly, except when you have a negative sort of crime or, those sort of things. So this is a very ghettoized place, both in the imagination of people here and also in terms of if you just come to the place and you see how it is and you compare it with other parts of the city, and also discursively, like I said, it's not a place that's been talked about enough. And also the other level of marginalization of Happy Valley that we found through our project was that because there's a lot of literature on Rum Boy, so that entire period of insurgency in Mizo is called Rum Boy, which literally translates to disturbed land, troubled land. There's a lot of academic discourse on Rum Boy. There's a lot of literature on Rum Boy, but Happy Valley is not one of those that that are usually mentioned, which is very ironic because later on, a lot of Happy Valley became a hotspot for a lot of people post that Ramboy, coming into the 70s and 80s. A lot of people who studied in Shillong, because Shillong was the educational hub for Mizos. A lot of the directors now in a lot of Mizoram offices and all studied in Shillong, because at that time people couldn't go to Delhi, couldn't imagine to go to Calcutta. So they would base themselves in Happy Valley. So Happy Valley is very much a part of, I think, I would argue, some scholars might argue back against me, but I would say it's a very pan-Mizo consciousness, right? It's very much a part of the pan-Mizo consciousness, but it's not something that is represented discursively. And so we wanted through our book also to sort of elevate a discursively ghettoized, marginalized community that is usually left out of the greater discussion, on the region, whether it's in the context of Shillong or Meghalaya, or whether it's in the context of Ramboy literature, So
Coming to the theme of the book, of course, memory plays a central role in it. And it's always and it's a huge thing to deal with in terms of when you're archiving memories and talking to a lot of people, especially the older generations. So how did the relationship with memory sort of shape your approach to storytelling, like your thoughts in terms of how you would present these narratives in the book?
I think, in the beginning, I think we really went with our eyes closed.
Mm.
Like, didn't really just from the start, from the get go, we didn't really know if people would be able to share their stories or would they'll give
Right.
us consent to even do this, because these are stories about trauma. And, to kind of wake that up again from a certain generation, I think it brings in a lot of, like, it wouldn't be easy for them to even talk about in the first place. So I think for both of us, like for me, visual wise, I think I just followed Karen's lead, because this is basically putting myself like as the outsider, going into her space, her people, her surrounding where she grew up in. I think taking that, just following her lead, and just and I think it took me some time also to get used to what this is going to look like, or how this is going to sound like, or be like in a book format. Like, it really didn't, it didn't really click at first sight. But I think, yeah, I would say, Karen would, I think, when you talk about memory, I think, because for me, like, memory is so important. I think that's the thing between, that's one common factor. Like, I base my work a lot on memory, because um especially when I work with visuals, because I've shared this story before, that I was not born in a like, a visual sort of world. Like, I did not see myself in a photograph, after the later part of the years, so for me, like, just building these memories in terms of visuals and going from there, I think, and also working with the archive, and there's a lot of going through these old photographs, and then, reimagining some things. And so it's all about, like, really stepping back in time, but really didn't know how to look forward with this project, but so take it, just following Karen's lead, and also, having that full trust, and also having the patience that, our narrators would be able to share, and taking it from there. And really don't, like, for me, it wasn't like, everything I could see that working with memory will be this or that or whatever. None of that. It was like I just went like blank. And yes, of course, later on, a lot of things came out. But yeah, Karen can continue. Yeah.
The thing with June is with her photographic practices, and it's not just because I love her and I adore her, but also she's able to follow light in a way that very few photographers are able to, in my opinion. And I have a lot of photographer friends, and I mean, no offense, I'm just saying that it's her particular way of following. They all have their own ways of following, because she follows light not just with the eyes, but she follows light with her ears and with her heart and with being present, and I have seen June being present like nobody else can. And it's a wonderful thing, because in real life, I mean, in non-professional or whatever, in normal life, she has the attention span of a goldfish, which you will agree with. But when she's present in an interview, or when she's listening to a story, or when she's following the light of a story, she really follows that light. And so that gave another dimension to how we captured memory. And you will see that the book also has a mix of archival photographs and photographs of that time and space, and it's this wonderful visual blend that she has made. In terms of the narration and the words, I always go back to a work that I love so much. I had it somewhere. It's called Trip. It's called no, no. It's called it's called forgotten the name of the book. Something by Shani Orgid, professor from London School of Economics. She talks about how we need to reimagine the ways in which we think we know things, the ways in which we build narratives, because we tend to have very beginning, middle, ends, sort of very neat narratives, which is hardly how it works. I mean, life itself is so fragmentary, right? I mean, I could not tell you a linear account of what happened today, or the past hour for that matter. But we expect that, and we always that when it comes to the book format, or when it comes to a movie, or when it comes to a creative work, or an academic work, whatever. And so we also wanted, in terms of how we presented the memories of the narrators, to also reflect that that reality that they were speaking, especially in the first section of the book, the language of trauma. And the language of trauma is never refined and polished, and generally you will have books upon books upon books that give you such fine lines on, and such concise and well structured narrations of what trauma, the trauma that people went through. But June and I did not sort of want that. We wanted to, we really wanted to centralize the language of trauma as a very fragmentary, sometimes very disconnected, sometimes even incoherent at times, because because a lot of times our narrators would launch into some other things. And so, we try to stay true to that language of trauma, which we now call language of trauma. We are actually writing a paper on that now. But yeah, so it was an editorial, and it was a methodological choice that we made in terms of how we dealt with memory. Was the language that we used to access that memory. We wanted it to be very, very close to what they spoke. We did not want to brush over their expressions, as we did not want to make it sound more dramatic than it was. Neither did we want to take away from the rawness of it. So that was a very important way in which we decided to deal with memory. So
Okay, fine. All right, thank you. This is for Janisha. Again, jumping off on the point of trauma once again. In your author note, you had written that at times you hesitated to raise your camera, recognizing the intimacy and the level of trauma it carries with it. How did you navigate or balance between documenting these moments photographically and preserving, once again, so to say, their sacredness?
Yeah. So yeah, I think with this project, because this is what, like, this, meeting these narrators was not like a one-off meeting. We kind of keep meeting them. I think before we even did, like, the proper sit down, I think we went to kind of ease ourselves. Like, I remember when we first started, we just went to take walks around, the locality, and just Karen introducing me to her neighbor, to an uncle, and to everybody else. And then we would just have, they would give me, we would be invited for meals and a cup of tea and all that. So it was this thing of making myself feel at ease first, because I think Karen would agree, but I am a very reserved sort of photographer. I don't like to call photographer, but like I really feel shy. I don't know how to express it, but I'm not like those, let's take out my lens, let's change lens. Oh, it's like it's too much for me. It's overwhelming as an act in itself, because for people to photograph me also, I feel like sometimes, I'm very hesitant for that. Like, so because I grew up also in a village, and a lot of times people would come and take out cameras, and we would run away. We were scared that people would do something to our, because we were told by our parents, just run. If anybody comes around, just run. Stranger taking out some equipment, run. So I think that kind of stayed on with me, but I don't know how I fell in love with photography. Like, now I am doing this act of taking photograph. But coming back to the book, I think that's why, like I said, it made me realize something. Like, we started off by listening. Like, Karen really gave me a sort of a safe space, and also a comfortable space to work with, with the people around. It was really something that, as I was journeying, I just realized that there are a lot of times I just forgot to take out my camera because I was listening, so this is why I call this whole book, like, for me it was not photograph really like by with my eyes, but really with my ears, because I was just there, present. And there are times, I don't know, I get these weird feelings, like it's very, I don't know, it's very surreal, but I feel like this is the right moment to take a photograph. Especially there are times when our piece would be expressing so much of emotions. Though I don't understand the language, by the way. I don't understand Mizo at all. We've been friends for so long, but I can understand a few slangs, or not slangs, some good words. Actually, praise God. I can understand that. Patyan Zara. But I don't really understand, like, the Mizo language. But it's amazing, like, when you actually in that space don't really understand the language, but you can actually understand the emotion,
Mhm.
and you feel like you actually understand everything that they're talking about. Like, that for me, it's still like something I've never experienced before. I'm not waiting, and we don't do like instant translation. We don't do it there. Like, Karen would just sit and listen, and I just hold my camera. There are times when I lift out my camera and photograph, and there are times usually when I just really sit together with Karen and just listen. So then there are these moments when when suddenly I remember uh, uh, in uh, in one of the narrator's house, like suddenly this beautiful light came in, but I remember my stiffness to carry, like it was beautiful, it was perfect, but I just couldn't carry, like I can't lift up my hands to take a picture, and I regretted it, but that gave way to another photograph. So there are moments like these which I felt very sort of, like it makes me feel very heavy. I remember coming back home and just looking at the photographs, and I don't know why I get so emotional, like I would shed a tear or two. Like I don't know, it's just, and I would wait for the translation to come, because we would send it right away for translation, and then and that's how I compare the translation with the photographs. Then I would look at my metadata, and then I would look at the translation at this minute, at this moment I click this photograph. So it was kind of an exercise for me as well, visually, because this is the first time I think I'm collaborating with somebody who writes so beautifully. Like for example, when Karen wrote Home, I don't even remember, the first poem in the book. Like for me, home, like initially my belief of home was very different to hers. For her, home is a person. For me, no, home is like a physical space, where I can be comfortable, and I can never think, I can never think beyond, like how can a person be home. But until she wrote that, and actually I felt it after the book. So these things like kind of changed my mind, like, and also like that is how I think the images also evolve with your understanding of the visual or with the text, and then you go forward with that. And I remember also many a times when I was not ready, like the last visual in the book, um I was not at all ready with it, but Api called me in when she was recounting, how his son was murdered, and then how they recollected all those things from his pocket and kept it. So she suddenly we were having tea, and she just took my hand and she's like, "Come with me to the bedroom, and I want to show you something." And I was not ready to photograph. It was like I was all over the place. And then she just kept those things there. She's like, "Take a photograph," you know. So again, you are prompted by the narrator to do this, do that, So, and it turned out to be such a special photograph, because I know it's not going to happen again ever. I don't think so Api would allow that photograph to be taken again by anyone else. Like I would say that, because I could see how personal it was for her to be showing these last things that was there and here. So a packet of cigarette, some coins, and a 10 rupee note. So those things, I think, like there are many times that I can't lift up my camera, but there are times that I was forced, and there are times that I can easily take a photograph and just weave it with the text, and that's how it comes about. Yeah.
Right. And connected to this question also, I think you might have answered this partly, but if there's more you would want to add to it, that I was curious to know if the way you were framing your subjects, w- was there something that changed as you went along in this project, like in terms of if you were photographing somebody who's talking or anything? Yeah, something about the framing. Was it um, the thoughts behind and or if it changed?
I think nothing was intentional, with
Okay.
this book. Nothing was intentional that I would take this frame or that
Mhm.
frame, but it just comes to me at that moment, like this frame works, or how I would frame them, like the portraits and all that. Like I remember Athari's mom. Athari, right? Athari's mom pulling me outside, and she held her chicken, and then she's like, click a picture of me, you know? And
Yeah.
then again, there you are. You're not like ready for any proper, like, okay, I'm just going to do this aesthetically. No, none of that. Just
Right.
okay
So a
before,
lot of times your
because,
subjects
yeah,
decided the frame for you. Yeah.
yeah. She decided she wanted to hold a chicken, and that's it. Like, click a photo, and then she was just standing like behind the light. So you can imagine, like she won't even turn like towards the light, like for me to and
Mm.
I'm also like very like that way. I would rather have the narrators be comfortable, and I would kind of work around that, rather than me telling them, okay, can you turn this way, or because the light is coming that way. No, none of that. It was like more like, let me make do with whatever. Even there's a son from behind holding a chicken, just make do. Like, that's the only child, that's the only moment you can have, you can capture. So yeah, nothing was intentional as such, but yeah, I do make space for them. I think I do take their cues when they want me to photograph, and that's easier also to work with. But yeah, at times, also we have to remember that we're working with these narrators who you don't really know what's going to happen. Like, you don't really know about their moods, then they're very moody. Sometimes I know, because I have a grandmother. Like, one time it's like, click my photo, next time it's like, delete it and just don't click my photo anymore. Like, you're dealing with so much of sensitivity around, so you just have to sometimes kind of just be okay with what you have, and then make it work around it. But yeah, but it was nice, it was nice. Some of the like, I have very fond memories of how these portraits were made, especially the one with Kay. Remember the one in Mizoram, the one where she was what's the name? Oh my god, sorry, my brain today, brain fog. um Somebody's
Yeah,
gonna
the one like she held her parents'
Yeah, yeah,
photograph.
yeah. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that was my favorite moment to photograph a portrait of the narrators, because there was just this one stream of light coming to the room, and she was just ready to hold her parents' photograph, and I mean, she was just like, ready for any kind of photograph. I'm like, please be here. She's like, okay, okay. So that was really nice for me also to be, like, she really understood, I think, what I was working with. So it was nice. Yeah.
Again, to take this question forward, and this is for both of you. So here, this is about um, memory for sure. Um, and it's both memory is both demanding and comforting. So while working on this project, were you know were there moments that were particularly one cathartic and maybe challenging also for both of you to encounter or uh, you know relive in a sense uh, through the people who were sharing their stories?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of yeah, instances where I think for me, just because I really, from the beginning, really, like, I've just known Karen, and the idea of Mizo was Karen and her friends. Didn't really, didn't really, really get to know the people, the community. And since Shillong is also as such, like, everyone is all, they're all in the little, kind of corners. We the Khassis would be in one side, and then then the others in other localities. So I think for me, the first time, I would say, just stepping into that, into Happy Valley, was really like, in some way it was like a surprise. Like, like Karen said, the whole idea of it being ghettoized, and I was quite little bit taken aback. Like, okay, where am I? Like, for a moment I forgot I was in Shillong. That's what I get the first feel from. I won't just say even the place, the surroundings, like, but even the smell, the feel of it feels different. You walking into a space where you really, even though it's in Shillong, which in the state where I come from, but you really walked into a space where you're very unfamiliar with things, with a lot of things. So that's when I feel like, initially it was like, in my head, I think, if Karen wasn't my friend, I would be like, I don't know if I could make it till the end types. I don't know if, because I understand, because the moment you enter there, like, people are all speaking in Mizo, and like, Mizos are supposed to speak only in Mizo. If they are among themselves, they wouldn't speak in any other languages. So here I am, like a Khasi, first of all, and then walking into this new space, and then couldn't understand what they're trying to, what they're talking to each other, and I'm just trying to figure out everything. So yes, there was some sort of discomfort, and a sort of a challenge for me, to how do I work my way around this, because I usually, like I said, like for me, photography is not very easy. Where I see something, I'm like, I am not aware of my environment, I quickly take out my camera. I can't do that. I'm always like very conscious of how would people react when I take out the camera, and how when I point the camera at something, how do they react to that. So for me, I think it was that's why those first two strolls around town, strolls around the locality was very important, just to kind of you know ease myself into it. And yeah, and I think the comforting part was uh many instances. I think by the end of it all, I think I feel like I have become very much part of their family, and feeling very comfortable walking in and playing with their cats and their dogs, and just finding my way around the house, and just walking up and down, and just feeling that comfort, how you would feel, when you welcome. I think that's that's one thing. I think when you do a project like this, that's why the collaboration is so important between two communities. I think like we're trying to talk about peace here, and apart from the topic that's already very heavy, like talking about trauma and displays, and all this, and then also we have the other politics of the other side of it, which is how do the Mizo feel when they are in Shillong, or how do we react to people who come from outside the state? How what is our perspective? What is our opinions about people who come from outside? Because many a times, we'd have a lot of opinions. I mean, it's the arguments are always there, but I think this is what makes me understand also, because I've always been surrounded by Khasi people, like at all times, and I'm very I think I'm very like in a way, like I'm very like my own types, like my own people, my own land types, like that. But I think doing this project also like open up my perspective, and also build new opinions about the people who are living in different localities, and the different communities who have come and actually built Shillong to what it is now. So I think that has really kind of pushed me to kind of, even though it was challenging, but like I remember an acquaintance, I would say a friend, but he told me like, how are you doing this project, with the Mizos? They won't really talk to you, then. But I was like, it's okay. That will be a challenge. But I think I realized later on, as I went forward, it's really not about the language, it's really not about what community you come from or what, but it's all about sharing our stories, our vulnerabilities, and it's all about that sharing that common space of basically building something. We are trying to constantly connect with each other, and if we don't give that a space, if we don't give that this kind of I would say a platform to do that, to have these discourses, to have these discussions about these things, I mean, like, then when, how can we grow, right? So I think so that's why, like, having these collaborations where even in the Northeast itself, to collaborate with each other, to collaborate between communities, I think it's something that we really push forward. So even from the archive, I think, coming back to the archive, like looking at all the work that has been collected so far, like a strong urge also makes a strong urge within us, is that to kind of foster these kind of relationships and to foster these kind of collaborations. That's why after Karen and I did this book, we have a couple of collaborations line up also, that is happening again, because I feel like this is only one way of, because usually art and can bring people together. It's a simple way of bringing people together, because yes, the talks can be there, negotiations can be there, but that's only when people of a certain level have those. But what about the rest of us? Who can connect with the rest of us? So I feel like these kind of the this kind of a project really helped me personally in understanding the way how two different communities look at each other, and how in the end of it, although it's very demanding, very um, uh, really not comfortable. But at the end of the day, I think now I can just walk into Happy Valley and say, hey, give me tea. I can just walk into one of their homes and be like, I'm hungry, give me some food, give me some buy. So, and that's the beauty of it. I think fostering these kind of relationships, that's really, really important.
So I will speak for it from more from a perspective of catharsis, because uh, I have to. There's a question of intersubjectivity here, but we're not get into that. But the people that we interviewed, they had their own grief, and I am sure in the process of sharing those things, there was something cathartic there for them. There was something cathartic in it for me as well. For me, because it triggered. So we have long moved out of Happy Valley because my father was in the army, and I spent, well, I wouldn't say all of my childhood, but large chunks of my childhood, like when we had holidays and all of that. It triggered in me something very different. It triggered in me a trail of memory. It triggered in me, like the smells that June was talking about, that was strange to her. They were very familiar to me, and they triggered ineffable things in me, ineffable memories. Ineffable memories means not a memory that I can describe in words, not visuals, not specific sounds or smells, but it was the entire thing. And then you remember what it was like to grow up in that environment. I remember, and the best part, and this was the most cathartic part, was that it reminded me of the wonder of being a child, because I remember growing up and, I slept with my grandparents. I have a poem about this, which I didn't add in the book, but about how I had a specific spot in my grandparents' bed and I would sleep there. And in the morning, I'd be woken up by the shouts of other children and the things I did with my grandfather in the morning. So all of these things, the magic, like he would make spit, jump from one finger to the other. And I was fascinated with that. I remember my grandfather waking up early to light what we in Khasis, Khasis call it shawla, we call it sikri, the coals. Uh, Running to the shop below and buying biscuits for 1 rupee. We used to get like 20 pieces for 1 rupee, I think. And then having, so it wasn't one thing, it triggered so much. And at the end of the day, growing up is a traumatic experience, I think, for everybody. And we all long in some way or the other for the wonder and innocence of childhood. So for me, the book triggered beyond catharsis. I think it triggered a sort of healing because I was able to access those parts of myself which I thought I'd lost. Being my, everyday teacher, adult self. Um, so that is what it was like for me. And yeah, on a very on a much more superficial level, I wouldn't say superficial, but on a much more surface level as well, it was just nice to be able to spend time with people that I had not spent time with for so long. So the project worked for me in terms of um, an unearthing of grief, in terms of catharsis, and also in terms of triggering healing on so many different levels. But I think that's the best way that I can explain that.
For the both of you then, with this experience, of course, Karen, we would have identified you as part of a diasporic group, and Junisha, perhaps part of a host culture in the sense. Did you have some breakthrough, or did it modify how you saw your own identities in the end?
I think June and I had very, very different notions of home and roots and belonging and identity. We've always had, because our backgrounds are so different. She grew up in Lingkot village, and that's what she's known for her whole life. I grew up not only child of diaspora who grew up with this history and this like this like historical ballast of like that in a rucksack, carrying them around of grandparents came from Mizoram, that sort of burden. But also my father happens to not be Mizo. He is an Anglo-Indian from the south, which again brings a totally different a kind of an otherness to my life experience as well. So there is an otherness I feel when I'm with Mizos. There's an otherness I feel when I'm with maybe Anglo-Indians, and there's an otherness I feel no matter where I am. I felt that otherness because of this and other reasons, but primarily because of this for a lot. So therefore, for me, belonging and an identity, these are all forms of seeking. These are all forms of becoming, like um, uh, the delusion notion of becoming, that one is never a being but always constantly a becoming. I walked into the project with that. uh, I would say that I still hold on to that, but I have also become very, very respectful of people's opinions when they feel tight, when they feel rooted to a place, or they feel rooted to an experience. When people choose to identify or to root themselves in a particular place, idea, place, idea, experience, um, ethnic, I mean, cultural identity. I understand where that comes from. I think that openness, because I was very militant about I was very militant about the necessary fluidity of these notions that Jess brought up, whether it's home, whether it's identity, whether it's roots, these sorts of things. In fact, my classes always start with getting kids to question their identity. I have a whole process that I do that by. Uh, and while I understand the necessity of questioning that, I also have fallen in love with, because I've also, beyond the book, spent time in June's village. I have seen her connection with, like, the land and the people, and I've seen her blossom in, and so when she says, "This is my home and these are my roots," like, the militant Karen who would rail against that idea has softened so much and has understood why people would be like that. So for me, that is I think the biggest change, is I understand why people claim to a particular place as home, as their roots, as their identity, as their culture, the preciousness of that, which was lost on a very othered person like myself, no matter where I went. Like, I grew up in, like, Bihar and Jammu and Kashmir, and I'd be like my brothers look nothing like me, so they're kind of Indian passing, and I'm like this, like, very Mizo looking Donoghue, which is an Irish surname, by the way, again. So uh, I, I never, it was very hard for me to understand, but through the project, through the time spent with June, I softened, I think, a lot in terms of, um, her stance, which is much more definite than my very fluid understanding of these things.
And I, on the other side, I think have understand your stance. Yeah, because like when I see Karen, like she's very connected to the people whom she surrounds herself with. Like she's really like full of love for the people whom who are there with her. So for me, I'm a little disconnected that way. I have my boundaries, I have my walls, but I think once with the idea of home, especially, like I said in the beginning, like when she wrote that poem, like home is found in leaving, it really made me think, because I've never felt like that before, because yeah, I've gone to do my masters outside the state and all that, but home for me is coming back to a specific structure, a specific space, a physical space. But I think after, like I think before, when we were friends, we were pretty blare about ideas like about all these things, but now with our matured selves that we are, I think
Really?
I a lot upon her words, what she says, like home is people, home is found in leaving. Like those are the things that now I realize, like I can connect with Karen. Like I understand what she says when she has written those words.
Mm.
So I think that's how I think that's why we said from the beginning, it's all about listening to each other. And I think we have never listened to each other as much as we did. It's always been, Karen has always been this busy rock star before, and I'm just like somewhere there, and and didn't really get to connect with her on such a level.
Mm.
But I think doing this project is a way for us also. I think you would agree, Kay, but for us to kind of rebuild our friendship, and from continuing our conversation from where we've left off, because I think we've seen so much of changes. um I think we've just changed a lot like over the 20 years we've known each other. Like I think we were very different from from those two girls who met in that classroom to now. Like there's a huge, vast difference in both of us. And the beautiful part of it is that how we have started to understand each other, even with our cultural differences as well. So that's what I think this book has really moved us in many ways. And that's why, like, when I said, like, at the end of the book, at the end of the project, that feeling of emptiness, was always there. Like, I don't know if I can rebuild, if we can rebuild something like that. It also made me question once, will our friendship, like, will our friendship also just become like, okay, Blair types? But I'm sure it won't. I think if nothing else, it'll just make it stronger. And we look forward in, like, traveling. Well, we've traveled quite a bit together. I mean, thanks to the book, we've never traveled together before, but I think after this book, we also get to know each other a lot, when we have to share spaces together. And I think that's why, as we grow older, I think we understand, like, these kind of relationships better than when we were younger and, a little bit carefree and a little bit of, we didn't really give importance to it. So yeah, it brought out the softer side in me as well. Like the kind of yeah, it kind of evokes these sort of emotions where I was like, questioning myself, like, what emotions are these? But yeah, I'm glad it did.
Right, right. There's one understanding of a historical event or something that has happened in the past and how, collectively it's remembered or recalled. But then when one encounters, personal stories, there's always, newer aspects that kind of emerge. So just something about how both of you navigated that and the kind of insights that brought into this particular project.
Um, so we did not consciously, I think, and it's very difficult consciously to go into an oral history project like ours, separating the personal from the collective, because the personal is the collective, and the collective is constitutive. I mean, the personal, the collective is constitutive of the personal, and so these are both interlinked. The what I what the so for me, what emerged that was very interesting at the end of this was not so much that not so much that is, yes, of course, I think Stories from the Valley does add to the depth or the richness of the already existing narratives that have been written about, or the already existing experiences, because I think we're the first ones to record the experiences of the people of Happy Valley. But apart from that, what I realized is that trauma, especially memory, especially traumatic memory, is not static. It is an ongoing negotiation. It is something that the people, even as we were speaking to them, I'm sure that had we gone, so oral history is at least, and again, I will not say all oral history, but sort of the kind of community history we were after was to try and capture experiences. So they would have thrown in years and dates. We were not so concerned for our project with the kind of dates that they mentioned. We were more interested in the truth of experience. And what I found very interesting was that memory is not static. Uh, it is an ongoing negotiation, especially the drum boy trauma memory. So the way that so it is still an ongoing conversation. So that memory is not something that is static, that is a recollection of something that happened in the past. I think for the average Mizo, I think at least up to my generation, maybe those in their 30s, it is still something, because we grew up with the stories. The generation after us maybe will not grow up with the stories, they will read about it. Again, that's a different sort of experience, and not have your grandparents relate it to you, right? So it's a generational difference also in how this memory is negotiated. But the collective that comes out of these personal personal narratives is what I find. I'm being so ineloquent here because I was not expecting this question, but it's a really great question. But what I'm saying is that continuing process. And I think people are still trying to understand and process their memories of that period. And I think that is not a closed, I mean, our book is just the tip of the iceberg. I think people are still processing how traumatic that was. And it raises a very, very important question, which, other scholars like Sanjay Hazarika and all have tried to raise, of how healing came. There were mass rapes, there was grouping, which was brutal, where people were uprooted from their villages and taken to other villages. There are heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching stories of people clawing at the earth, trying to get tubers to eat. And so time has distanced us from the trauma of what happened in Mizoram, which is, I can go and talk to people about Nagaland or Manipur and it connects immediately. But Mizoram, because of that time distance and because healing has taken place, it's very the kind of memory that comes out of it is again impacted by that circumstance, right? And so I think there's still a lot of work to be done in this regard on that period. And I think while a lot of great work has been done, I think the work needs to continue because those memories and people's understanding of those memories, people's recollection, people's retelling, and people's processing of those memories is also constantly changing still. So, so that is what I found to be very, very interesting about collective trauma memories that came out of our project.
Right. So one very obvious question that we had was like, what do you hope your readers, would take away from this book, especially those who may not share the same cultural or personal context? And if I were to answer this question myself as a reader, for me, it would be this idea of resilience, because I think that is something which was, of course, common to all the stories that you've covered in this book. But yeah, if there's anything else that you would want to add it, for people reading the book and may not be as familiar with the context.
Yeah, Kay, you can answer that first.
My dogs just entered. I'm a little, but if they don't make a noise, I won't bother with them. Very quickly, because I think we have very little time. What I want readers to take away from this book is, I want people to have lots of questions. I think we've lost out on being curious about the world. We're so used to knowing. We're so used to reading a book and coming away knowing. We're so used to watching a film or watching a piece of news or reading a comment and feeling like you have this knowledge about people or a place or about a thing. And I think that takes away from the joy of curiosity. And so I would like our readers to not come away reading this book feeling like they have really learned something as much as I would love for them to have difficult questions, easy answers. And so I would like them to be curious about, who are these people? What is this book trying to do? Are they, what is it? What is the point of bringing this up? So I would like, I mean, the ideal reader is one who would have a lot of questions. The ideal reader is somebody who would try and seek the answers to these questions. But yeah, so that is what I would want the book to do in a reader.
Yeah, Karen has summed it up beautifully. And I think for us, I think the intention also from the beginning was basically because this book was meant for the narrators, for the people of the community. That's why we have decided also that it would be, in the language that they are comfortable reading, because many a times I think this is what has happened. Like we've lost, many a times people would come take our stories and then doesn't really go back to the narrators, doesn't really go back to the community. So one thing that I'm very happy about this particular project is that it has, brought in a lot of memories and brought in a lot of joy and to the community. Our RPs can sit and look at their photographs and read their stories. Like some of them cannot imagine that there's something like this would, like, their stories could land up in a book. So this is for the community. I think it's very important that we do work. Our intention, our intention should be for the people who we have gathered gathered these stories from, and not really for, you know, dissemination has to be, you know, looked in a different way. I think that's what archiving has taught me, you know, because every time it questions me, like, what are we doing, these photographs being just circulated all around the world, but narrators seeing themselves after 40, 50 years. I mean, it's really not fair, and some of them did not really see themselves in a photograph, or, you know, or what was written about them. A lot of researchers would come, take their stories, take it with them everywhere they go, and, you know, put it in a book, put it in their research. But really, the narrators never really know what happened to, you know, their interviews. So this is something that we knew from the beginning, that this is for the community. So I'm happy that it happened. So there's, you know, projects like these should be encouraged, and yeah, look forward to.
Any memorable reaction from the people that you've covered in the book when it was out?
My goodness me, we got a lot, right, Kay? Like, I think Kay's
Mm.
messages were flooded, like
Yeah.
different kinds of reactions. But I think the one that stayed with me, Kay, I think I should, before you say it, the
Go
little
on.
girl, you know, who, the little girl from your church who,
Oh,
you know, she
yeah.
said that she read the book, and, you know, she really enjoyed. And that's what we have to do, you know, to get there.
Hmm.
Usually, you know, this generation now, they're really not interested in their grandparents' stories. Forget their grandparents, not even their parents' stories, you know. So for a young girl, she's in class 7, right, Kay?
Yeah, yeah, at that
So
time. Yeah.
yeah, at that time. So 2 years ago, she was in class 7. So for a young girl, you know, to kind of take a book like ours and read it and finished it and had some good things to say, and I mean, that's it. We won. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think that was one, of course, and
There are many. There are many.
so just the
Can't list.
joy with which it received. I mean, you know, we had some of these grandmothers that we interviewed sent us very, you know, like clearly very pretentious videos of them reading the book very studiously, and had their, you know, sons or grandchildren record those, and they're sending us these videos of them reading the books very studiously. It's so funny, but also, oh my God, random people
That's
saying that,
wow.
oh, that lady, I used to sell ice cream with her outside the school. It's a very Shillong thing. And a couple of others were like, you know, where people were saying that they couldn't afford to buy the book, although we tried to be very, very fair with price. And this is something that we didn't have time to get into. And I think it's not really so important also. But we did sell the book at below print cost. But still, even with that, there were people who couldn't buy. So, you know, we're great businesswomen, as you can see evidently. But there were kids who, you know, who came and said, "Oh, Karen, you know, we shared with the book, and I borrowed the book from here, and then I read that part." So it's just been, and another somebody else came and said it was like reading a documentary. So I think that's a pretty novel compliment. Who reads documentary, you know? So I was like, oh, hey, great. Reading cartoon format documentary, something like that. So we've got a lot of interesting responses. So we're pretty happy with yeah, the responses that we got as a whole. Yeah.
Right, right. And so obviously, like in terms of photographs, also, I think June was talking about how there's just, I mean, so many more photographs, and the book is just the tip of the iceberg. So is there like a, you know, idea of a part two of the book, let's say, or how do you plan to use the rest of the photographs, maybe, or stories that you have that the book has not been able to cover?
I think that really I would love for June to answer that question. I'll be level with you guys. I was telling this to, I mean, I was sharing this with the both of you. We do have people who still want copies of the books. In fact, my own personal copy of the book right now is with a friend who wanted to read it. And last month it was in Bangalore with Gender Bender, and
Mm.
I couldn't travel with the book, so I sent the book as a representative of June and I. And the book. So my copy has been traveling because, and so there is that excitement around maybe not a second edition, but at least a reprint.
Mm.
Um, but June and I are very we want to play it by ear, and so we're like we're waiting for it to feel right. I don't know if that sounds strange, but we are both like, when it feels right, uh, we will know, and we will try to put out a second edition, which may happen, which may never happen. A second reprint, sorry. And in terms of an edition, June certainly has some more ideas, at least for the photographs. We wanted to do an exhibition in the locality itself, on the streets, like just for the people there to enjoy. But she is a very busy woman. I not so much, as you can see. But so it's been difficult for the both of us to find that time to really sit and work on it. But we do want to do more things, and I imagine this is what June would also say. Yeah. So hopefully a second reprint. June, I was just saying that we want to do a second reprint, but then we want to be really instinctive about it, and so we haven't had it. We don't have a date as yet.
Ah,
Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
that fair?
Yes.
And I also said that we're planning to do an exhibition in the locality. That will be a way that we extend the work. And so Prita asked also if we wanted to have a second edition, because there's so many photographs and all
Yeah.
that. But I was talking about like how, rather than a second edition, perhaps you would have other formats in which you would release those photographs into the world, right? So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That was
I
about,
think
I was just about to ask that also, if there was some other format that maybe you've thought about to use the photographs or the stories.
Yeah, I think I don't know if Karen has mentioned, but we have thought about this book being in different, it can be disseminated in different formats also. Like
Right.
it's not just the end; it doesn't just end with the book, but because we've had one exhibition which is a continue. It's called the continuation of stories from the valley. So all those photographs and stories that didn't make it in the book was put up in an exhibition. So we are planning to have more of that for the work to travel and interact with people in different formats as well, because I feel like there is like we'd like to take this work, we'd like to take their stories as far and wide as possible. So, and Kay also wants to do this, right, in terms of in the academics, to make it as a paper and a monograph, and all that. So yeah, we
no,
we
monograph. You said no to the monograph, right? So we're doing a
no,
paper.
yeah, a paper and those kind of things. I think, yeah, we're continuing with let it travel. That's what I tell Kay. Like, you can always take it with you, in your own journey. I'll take it with me, with our own journeys, and whenever we can, we do it together. So there's no there's no one way really to how we want this book to be and shape and form. Like, it's just fluid. Let it be there. And
Right,
if
right.
anyone is interested to write about it, continue with it. It's all right. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It was such a, I mean, I remember it being such an engaging read. And of course, the photographs were amazing. And uh, yeah, I mean, just reading it, yeah, I think I covered a little more than a half of the book in one day, and maybe the other another one. But no, thank you so much for giving us the time. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Pritha. Thank you, Jess, for talking to us. And we always love to talk about our book. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank
We would
you.
like to, yeah, as long as it lived. Like, this is its second year, so we are very
Mm.
hopeful that this year too it will travel somewhere. It will do something. So we're hopeful.